Greetings, Illumineers, and welcome to 10 more rules and interactions you might get wrong from Archazia's Island. Now, my first video like this was way more successful than I expected, so what does that mean? A sequel, of course. Now let's get into it. Number 1, an update on Zhou. The text of this card does not specify what kind of challenge the first one was, just that there was a challenge in the first place. While I have not seen any official rulings on this, in the discussions I've had with our local judges, we are all confident that it means your first challenge could be to either a character or a location. But the second challenge would have to be to a character in order to get his triggered effect. This is the only quick one though, so let's buckle up for the rest. Number 2, Tekka Elemental Terror. Tekka has the ability Ancient Rage, which reads, during your turn, whenever an opposing character is exerted, banish them. This seems simple, but some questions have come up. For example, what if your opponent's board is full of exerted characters when you play her? What happens? First, the word whenever means that it's a triggered ability, so it will use the bag just like any other triggered ability. But importantly, it means it's only checked when a card changes state from ready to exerted. If any characters are exerted when Tekka is played, none of them are changing state from ready to exerted, so her ability is never triggered. However, this could be paired with any exert effects, just like the popular Elsa 5th Spirit, which exerts a character on play. Same with similar effects on other cards like Pinocchio Talkative Puppet or Last Ditch Effort. When I first read this card, I was worried about it being way too powerful for things like songs and challenges, but that's because I missed the most important line, during your turn. This effect does not trigger during the opponent's turn, when they would sing or challenge or exert activated abilities, so the effect would not trigger in those cases. And since, as of now, you cannot play cards or activate abilities on your opponent's turn, the only way to get this effect is if you exert their characters with some effect, or they become exerted by some triggered effect. Number 3, Tekka with Mufasa, guest starring Elsa. Let's look at a weird example. The opponent has a Mufasa in play, and I have a Tekka. I banish the Mufasa, and they reveal Elsa Spirit of Winter off the top of their deck. They choose to play it for free. What happens? Well, Mufasa's ability reads, when this character is banished, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character card, you may play that character card for free, and they enter play exerted. Otherwise, put it on top of your deck. So Elsa does not enter readied and is then exerted by Mufasa's ability. It states that she just enters already exerted. With that in mind, she never changes state while she's in play, so Tekka's ability doesn't trigger on this. However, let's say that the opponent also has a Diablo Devoted Herald and Merlin Goat in play when they do this. Elsa's Deep Freeze ability goes into the bag, and they can choose to exert their own characters on resolution as part of a single resolving effect. And since that doesn't say opposing characters, they can choose their own. So if they wanted to, they could choose their own Diablo and Goat to be exerted. When they change state from ready to exerted, they would trigger Tekka's ability to banish both of them. Notably, because I am the active player and I control Tekka, those triggers belong to me, so I choose the order they resolve as they come out of the bag, and I will resolve them before any of my opponent's triggers. I resolve Goat's banish trigger, he's banished, and his lore ability enters the bag, joining the banish trigger for Diablo. I then resolve the banished Diablo trigger, and his draw ability joins Goat's lore ability in the bag. I have nothing else to resolve, so my opponent then chooses to resolve their remaining Goat and Diablo triggers however they would like. Number 4, Giant Cobra, Ghostly Serpent. Now, while Giant Cobra has the Vanish ability, I covered that in a previous video, and you can check that out in the link below. What I'm way more interested here in is the second ability, Mysterious Advantage, which reads, when you play this character, you may choose and discard a card to gain 2 lore. A couple of things. First, this is a triggered ability that will go into the bag when you play the card. Upon resolution, that is when you choose to discard a card for the lore. If you have no cards in hand when you go to resolve, you can't gain the lore. But what if you have something in play that would allow you to draw a card, like say, a Magic Broom? Thanks to the post-Melbourne DLC ruling clarity, the 2 triggers enter the bag at the same time, as described in Rule 873. Broom's choice to banish draw and Cobra's choice to discard gain lore all enter at the same time. Since the triggers entered the bag simultaneously, thanks to Rule 874, players may choose to resolve them in any order. If you choose to resolve a Broom first, you can banish the Broom to draw a card. Then, when you go to resolve Cobra's ability, you have that card in hand which you can use to discard for the 2 lore. As a quick side note, This similar effect is also true for older existing cards like Tipo Growing Sun, which would operate the same way. If you had a broom in play, and then you played a Tipo with no other cards in hand, both triggers enter the bag. If you choose to banish and draw with the broom, you can then use that card you drew for Tipo's ability to put it into the inkwell. Number 5, Lady Tremaine Bitterly Jealous. Lady Tremaine has the ability That's Quite Enough, which reads, exert to return chosen damaged character to their player's hand, then each opponent discards a card at random. A couple of specifics for this one. First, when it says return chosen damaged character, you have to choose a damaged character. If you go to try to activate this ability and the opponent has no damaged characters, but perhaps you do, you would have to choose your own as it's the only legal target to choose. If there are no legal targets, you go to resolve as much as you can, and each opponent should discard a card at random. Next, there is a specific way the card text is formatted that may be counterintuitive. After exerting, it says to return chosen character to player's hand, period. Then each opponent discards a card at random. These are two separate effects that are not dependent on each other. There is no intervening if clause, no comma in a single sentence, and no when you do. It's just first thing, period, second thing. So when you go to resolve this ability, some weird things might happen if there are no characters in play. If nobody controls a character, you still try to resolve as much as possible, meaning you can't resolve the first part, but you do resolve the second, and each opponent discards a card at random. And if you have a character in play, like mentioned earlier, you will need to choose your own character before each opponent discards. The card We Don't Talk About Bruno has a similar effect, but is in distinctly different formatting and a key difference in phrasing. First, it's a single sentence separated by a comma, which normally wouldn't be an issue following Rule 7123, which describes the A then B ability ruling, resolving all effects as much as possible, but the issue comes from the differences in the second part of the text. Tremaine reads, then each opponent discards a card at random, whereas We Don't Talk About Bruno reads, that player discards a card at random. Because that player has nothing to refer to if the first half was never resolved, there is no that player, so there's nobody to discard anything. Number 6, Mushu and Mulan. Mushu Majestic Dragon has the ability Guardian of Lost Souls, which reads, during your turn, whenever one of your characters banishes another character in a challenge, gain 2 lore. And the question here is, how does this work with Mulan, Elite Archer, and her triple shot ability? Let's see. Both Mulan and Mushu are in play. My opponent has 3 exerted characters in play, 2 human Sisus and a Tipo, and I challenge Tipo with Mulan. Between her direct combat damage and her ability, she's able to deal enough damage to banish all 3 characters, but how much lore do we gain? Well, let's play out the triggers, abilities, and steps one at a time so we can find out. First, Mulan is declared as a challenger to Tipo, and from Rule 4362, both are considered to be in the challenge. Going through the challenge steps, we come to damage at Rule 43612 through 15. Characters deal damage to each other, which triggers Mulan's triple shot, and in this case also triggers Mushu's Guardian of Lost Souls ability because Tipo was banished. From Rule 43616, these effects are added to the bag and then resolved in an order of your choice. Let's say we resolve Mulan's trigger first and deal an additional 2 damage to each of the Sisus, banishing them. At this point, Mushu's ability does not trigger again. Those Sisus were not banished in a challenge. Because per Rule 4363, only the challenging character and the characters being challenged are considered to be in a challenge. So while the Sisus were banished by an effect during a challenge, they were not banished while in a challenge. And at the end, you still have a lingering Mushu marble from the Tipo being challenged earlier, which would then resolve, gaining you 2 lore. Unless a future ruling changes the number of characters in a challenge, Mushu shouldn't be able to gain any more than 2 lore per challenge. Number 7, Baloo Old Iron Paws. Just a quick word on Baloo. First, damage counters can still be put or moved onto any character, even with 7 strength or more, because placing damage, like with Queen of Hearts' Unpredictable Bully, or moving damage, like with Belle Accomplished Mystic, is not considered as damage dealt. Cards like Queen of Hearts put the damage on, per Rule 9.2, and cards like Belle move the damage, per Rule 9.3. And both of them are governed by 921, which reads, if an effect puts a damage counter onto a character or location, that does not count as dealing damage to that character or location, and isn't affected by modifications to damage that is dealt, like resist. So in Baloo's case, it ignores the damage placement because damage is being put or moved on, not a character being damaged. Number 8, Gantu, Experienced Enforcer. Another one for Gantu here. He has two abilities, one of which prevents characters from singing and another that adds an additional tax cost onto actions and items. Let's look at each one individually. Close all channels may stop characters from singing, but notably does not stop songs from being played in other ways, such as hardcasting them for ink or playing them with an ability like Prince Naveen. This is also a symmetrical effect, so if you are including songs in your own deck, be sure to sequence them such that you are able to sing them before playing Gantu. The ability Don't Get Any Ideas adds an additional 2 ink to the cost of playing items or actions. And like the first ability, is also symmetrical, but being symmetrical also has a weird downside here. Not only does it affect your own items and actions, but if you and an opponent both have a Gantu in play, this ability stacks, meaning that both of you will have to pay an additional 4 more ink for any actions or items being played as long as both remain in play. This is also true if either of you have 2 copies of your own. However, this cost increase does not apply to cards being played for free. As noted in the reminder text, this does not affect singing songs, but it also does not affect other ways to play songs for free. Rule 43410 states, if a card can be played for free, ignore all ink costs when paying for it. Other steps required to play the card and non-ink costs still apply, but ignore the costs of playing it. So if you have that Prince Naveen from earlier, he would be able to play a song from his ability for free and not have to pay the extra. Since the text of the card says free, we can interpret this as whatever the cost was, even with the additional tax, it is now free. Number 9, Mother Gothel, Vain Sorceress. This should be a quick one. Mother Gothel has the ability Now You've Upset Me, which reads, whenever one of your characters challenges, you may move 1 damage counter from chosen character to chosen opposing character. This is a great excuse to go through the steps of challenging as described in Rule 436. Specifically the order of events in a challenge, which would affect how triggered abilities and things like that would work. Let's go through step by step. First, the player declares one of their characters is challenging another character. The declared character must have been in play and dry. Second, the player chooses an exerted opposing character to be challenged. Third, the players check for any challenging restrictions that would prevent that. Fourth, the challenging player exerts the challenging character. Fifth, the challenge occurs. Sixth, while challenging, effects apply. Seventh, effects that would trigger are added to the bag. Now here's where Gothel's ability triggers and enters the bag. Notably, this is before damage is being dealt in the 8th step, which means you could move a damage counter before dealing damage herself. What does this look like? Well, let's say I have a Mother Gothel with 3 damage counters on it, and my opponent has an exerted Lilo making a wish. I declare that I'm challenging Lilo with Gothel, and we go down the steps of challenging. Her ability triggers and goes to resolve, allowing me to move 1 damage counter from herself onto Lilo. A game state check will determine that Lilo has enough damage on her to be banished and is banished. When moving to the damage step, Lilo is no longer there to deal any damage, so the rest of the challenge fizzles. At the end, Lilo is gone, and now Mother Gothel only has 2 damage left on her. Number 10, Belle and Scrooge. This is a bit of a strange one because it's still up in the air about officially how some of these things actually work. Well, at least we know most of it for sure. Both of them have ways to play themselves for free, and both of the methods for paying for them for free are activated abilities. However, they're abilities that can only be activated while they are in your hand. Let's look at each of them. Belle, Apprentice Inventor, has the ability What a Mess, which reads, during your turn, you may banish chosen item of yours to play this character for free. So, if Belle is in your hand and you have a popsicle in play, you can choose to banish that popsicle as part of Belle's activated ability and put her directly into play. Scrooge McDuck, Resourceful Miser, has a similar ability, though his says that you have to exert 4 of your items in order to play him for free. With the 2 of these cards in your deck, you could sequence the cards such that you exert 4 of your items to play Scrooge and then banish 1 of those exerted items in order to play Belle, so long as both of the cards are in your hand and you have enough items to play them. But there have been some quirks and questions arising about the templating and wording. Basically, if it's an activated ability, could you use that ability while it's in play? For example, if you had a Belle in play, could you choose to just banish an item and then following the do as much as you can for resolving, just let the play her for free part fizzle? Maybe you have no other items in your discard pile and want to get something back with a Tamatoa. Putting it into your discard by banishing it could be seen as an advantage. Or what if you have a Scrooge in play and you could somehow benefit from exerting your items? Well, the full answer is It's tricky. According to Kyle at Ravensburger, for right now, the official ruling is that Belle's ability does not function while she is in play. Same goes for Scrooge. But he also discusses about how he's actively working on the language to address this. I could assume some future templating could make this more clear, perhaps something like adding text on the card like this ability can only be activated while in your hand, but that makes the text formatting more clunky and adds a bunch of extra words. So maybe a line could be added somewhere in the comprehensive rules document about activated abilities. Something like, cards which use activated abilities to put themselves into play can only activate those abilities while they are in your hand. Or more ambiguously, while not in play, so that could allow possible future activated abilities from the discard pile. Either way, that's good to know. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully this was helpful or at least informative, and if you think I got anything wrong or you have your own favorite weird rule interaction to share, put it in the comments below, and as always, stay questing and stay winning. If you enjoyed that, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you want more gameplay or breakdown videos, check out the playlist and recommendations here.